So what is sugar? Well, sugar is found in all foods that contain carbohydrates, including fruit and vegetables, grains and dairy. And all carbohydrates are made up from three simple sugars known as mono-saccharides, glucose and fructose and galactose. Now these group together in different combinations, making more complex carbohydrates. As an example, regular table sugar, which I have here, sweet little thing, or sucrose is made up of fructose and glucose, whilst milk sugar or lactose is made up of glucose and galactose. But without getting too heavy into the science of it all, sugar can be classified into two main categories: natural sugar and added sugar. Now, natural sugars are those which are naturally occurring in certain foods, such as fruit in the form of fructose, vegetables, and milk in the form of lactose. Natural sugars not only provide energy, but also other added health benefits, including water, fiber, various micronutrients, and antioxidants, which makes this source of sugar the healthiest choice. Added sugar, on the other hand, is sugar that is added to foods primarily during the processing of packaging foods, or added by the consumer before cooking or baking. It can also include any natural sweeteners such as honey and pure maple syrup if they are seen on an ingredient list. Added sugars can be found in just about everything that comes in a box or packet, which is pretty much 80% of the foods on our supermarket shelves, including items such as biscuits and soft drinks and cereals. Basically, everything that has been processed contains added sugar because it increases the shelf life by acting as a preserver. It's cheap, it increases the appearance of food, and it makes everything taste better. And added sugars do not provide any nutrients, only calories, making this type of sugar a not so healthy choice. Now, this is an important point, as sugar is often decried as addictive, fattening, and even toxic. But the truth is that it's not all bad for you, especially if you eat mostly natural sources of sugar. However, the problem is that many of us don't. In fact, many people in the westernized countries eat on average 19 teaspoons of added sugar per day, with some adults and kids even consuming up to 30 teaspoons of sugar per day, which is many times over the recommended daily intake of sugar, and even enough to fill a large bathtub each year. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm guilty of it too. Whilst I don't consume anywhere near this amount of sugar today, I was a bit of a sweet tooth as a kid, I have to admit. I've got great memories of running down to the local milk bar and picking up a bag of sugary goodness for about 40-50 cents. Sherbet sticks, Whiz Fizz, Redskins, Milkos, fags, strawberries and creams, freckles, and all the rest. My dentist seemed to like it too, as I probably paid off his house with the amount of cavities that I had to get fixed. Well, my parents did anyway. Well, let's face it, sugar does taste good, as does anything that you add it to. But the reality is that it's not all sweet when it comes to added sugar, including the whole host of health problems that consuming too much of it can cause. The main problem being increased weight gain. And I say the main problem because excess weight is something almost 8 out of 10 of us struggle with today. And sugar is energy, and if we don't burn off this excess energy, then guess what? It ends up going to our waistlines as fat. Also, much of the added sugar that we consume is in the form of fructose. For example, sugar-sweetened beverages and juices. Now, excess fructose increases your hunger and desire for food by causing resistance to leptin, an important hormone that regulates hunger and tells your body when to stop eating. The result is an increased amount of visceral fat, a kind of deep belly fat associated with many conditions and health problems that I'm going to go through next. But before I do, I want to draw this out for you so that you understand exactly how this works here, as the general premises of this underlies not only weight gain, but also most health problems which occur from having too much added sugar in our diet. Okay, so I'll just draw this out now. All right, so on the left here, on the right here, okay, draw a little graph. I'll draw it, I'll move out of the way. So here on the left we have blood sugar levels / energy, and down the bottom here we have time after the meal in hours. So let's just draw some times here. I'll just do it now so it's easy. 12 p.m. 1. I'll make that 1 here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry guys, I'll jump out of your way in 1 second. 5. Okay, so I'll just explain that to start off with. So what we've got here is we've got our blood sugar levels, in other words our energy, and what we've got here is our time after a meal in hours. We've got 12 p.m, 1 p.m, 2, 3, 4, 5 p.m. So let's say, for example, you have today you have a healthy salad roll with some protein in it for lunch. So at here at 12 p.m. we have a healthy salad roll. Now what happens is that after we have that salad roll, our blood sugar levels spike up a little bit and then go down a little bit like this. So I'm going to write here salad roll. I'm going to write, that would be about 250 calories. So 250 calories. So we've had a salad roll here at 12 o'clock, and what's happened is it's got hardly any added sugar in it, so it's hardly spiked our blood insulin levels, right? And as a result, it's given us slow, steady energy release throughout the whole afternoon. That satiety is there, so we feel full and satisfied for the whole afternoon. Now, to show you the effect of added sugars, let's say that instead of having that salad roll, we decide to go to, let's say, McDonald's today. All right, let's go to McDonald's, okay? And let's have, so same thing, 12 o'clock. We're going to have a medium size, so meal deal. So meal, medium size, McDonald's. That would be just like a Big Mac. So let's say Big Mac. Which is, if my memory is correct, at 1100 calories. 1100 calories. Okay. So what happens is, after we have our Big Mac meal deal, very high in added sugars. So what happens is, our blood sugar levels spike up. And then what happens is, our body doesn't like our blood sugar levels so high because it's dangerous. Our pancreas, a marvelous little pancreas, that fantastic organ, secretes insulin to drop our blood sugar levels down. So we get this kind of effect going on here. And then it restabilizes and goes back up like this. Okay, so you're probably thinking, what's the big deal about this? Well, what we've got here is we've got two zones here. So we've got this peak here. So, and we've got this peak here. Sorry, this low period here. So, let's start this one first here, okay? This one. What's happened here, I'll jump over this side. What's happened here is our insulin, our blood sugar levels have gone extremely high, okay? Before our pancreas is secreting insulin to drop that down. Now, that is a problem. The problem with that is that when we've got high levels of insulin in our body, so equals high insulin, then we've also got high fat storage, meaning that fat is more inclined to be delivered to our waistline or wherever else in our bodies to be stored as fat because we have that high insulin. The other thing that we get here is that we get, we can develop something called insulin resistance. Which can lead to things like diabetes and a whole other heap of health problems, which I'll discuss very soon. So, because what's happening is if your pancreas is continuously secreting insulin to drop your blood sugar levels because of all the added sugar that you're having, then you're literally wearing that whole system out. It's not meant to do that. It's only meant to do that occasionally, not on a daily basis, let alone 2 or 3 times a day, which with many of us consuming so much sugar is happening consistently, which is why we're seeing our bodies become resistant to insulin and an epidemic of things like diabetes and etc. At the bottom end of this scale, so when our blood sugar levels go below the normal level before returning up again, then what we get here is we get equals fatigue. We've all experienced maybe at 3 p.m. in the afternoon when our blood sugar levels drop after having a sugary meal, or maybe someone brought a donut into the office, and then you get that period off where you just want to fall asleep, and sometimes you literally fall asleep in your chair. So what happens is we get that fatigue, and when we get fatigue, then we automatically get hungry or hunger. So what's happened here? Let's have a look at it again. So over here, we've had a salad roll at 12 p.m. which is packed full of nutrients and goodness. And it's kept us satisfied all the way to 4 or 5 p.m. in the evening. 250 calories. And over here, at the same time, we've had a Big Mac, medium Big Mac meal deal from McDonald's, which is a whopping 1100 calories, and at, you can see here, between about 2:15 and 3:30, we are starving. We are literally ravenous because our blood sugar levels are so low. So I show you this chart to highlight the importance of reducing added sugar in our diet. from a scientific point of view because of, number one, primarily the weight gain, which is the biggest problem according to the World Health Organization. Overweight and obesity is the biggest problem that we are facing today. And that is because, not because of the obesity itself, but because of the host of problems which obesity, overweight and obesity cause risk factors for, which I'm about to go into now. And especially if this is happening on a daily basis, it's a huge problem. So now that you're clear on how this works, I want to talk about all of the other problems added sugar can cause in regards to health. And the next problem that I want to talk about is an increased risk of heart disease, which is the #1 cause of death worldwide. And consuming too much sugar increases your risk of developing it by almost 50%. And this is because excessive amounts of sugar can lead to obesity, inflammation, high triglyceride, blood sugar, and blood pressure levels, which are all risk factors for heart disease. Additionally, consuming too much sugar, especially from sugar-sweetened drinks, has been linked to atherosclerosis, a disease characterized by fatty artery clogging deposits. Another health problem of consuming too much added sugar is an increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes, which has almost doubled in recent years. Obesity, which is often caused by consuming too much sugar, is considered the strongest risk factor for diabetes, as I just mentioned before. However, prolonged sugar consumption also drives resistance to insulin. Okay? Resistance. A hormone produced by the pancreas that regulates blood sugar levels, which is why I wanted to draw it out there for you. Insulin resistance causes blood sugar levels to rise and strongly increases your risk of diabetes. In other words, too much sugar in your body literally poisons your organs from working properly. Also, too much sugar increases your risk of developing certain cancers, such as esophageal, endometrial, pleural, and stomach cancers, which is nasty. This happens both through increased weight gain, which significantly raises your risk of cancer, but also through increased inflammation in your body and insulin resistance, both of which also significantly increase your risk of developing cancer. Next, consuming too much sugar impairs our body's uptake and utilization of calcium and magnesium and skew the body's mineral balance, including the depletion of copper. And this really increases your risk of developing osteoporosis and fractures caused by even the most minor of strains. In other words, sugar crystals act like sandpaper on your bones. Next, too much added sugar, especially fructose, can lead to a fatty liver. Unlike glucose and other types of sugar, which are taken up by many cells throughout the body, fructose is almost entirely broken down by the liver. In the liver, fructose is converted into energy or stored as glycogen. However, the liver can only store so much glycogen before excessive amounts are turned into fat. Large amounts of added sugar in the form of fructose overload your liver, leading to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, a condition characterized by excessive fat buildup in the liver, which is really common. Consuming sugar-sweetened beverages will also increase your risk of developing fatty liver by about 60%. In a similar way, having consistently high blood sugar levels can cause damage to the delicate blood vessels in your kidneys, which can also lead to kidney disease. I briefly mentioned this one before in terms of the cavities that added sugar can cause, but it can also lead to overall poor general dental health. For example, the bacteria in your mouth feeds on sugar and releases acid byproducts which cause tooth demineralization. Poor general dental health can also increase your risk of heart disease too, so you've got to be careful there. Consuming too much added sugar also raises uric acid levels in the blood, which increases the risk of developing or worsening gout, an inflammatory condition characterized by pain in the joints, which is really painful. If you've ever had it, you'd know. And too much added sugar can also lead to impaired memory and accelerate cognitive decline, including an increased risk of developing dementia, which is, seems to be really common these days. Too much added sugar to your diet can also affect your immune system by causing your blood sugar to rise, which we saw that, which can activate an enzyme called protein kinase C. And this enzyme leads to dysfunction in neutron fields, which are a type of white blood cell that travel to the source of the infection, eat, and then destroy the invading microorganism. In fact, the effectiveness of white blood cells, our immune system, which fight infection, can decrease up to 50% after 1 to 2 hours of eating sugar, and can last up to 5 hours after consuming just one bout of added sugar. In other words, if you're eating added sugar on a regular basis, then you're much more inclined to catch any cold or flu going around. So too much added sugar can also lead to an increased acceleration of the skin aging process and wrinkle formation. I've got a few of those, which occurs via an increased production of advanced glycation and end products. In a similar way, an increased risk of developing acne occurs with increased androgen secretion, oil production, and inflammation in response to too much sugar in your body. Also, increased cellular aging occurs when eating too much sugar because it accelerates the shortening of our telomeres. So our telomeres actually get shorter, which are molecules that hold part or all of your genetic information found in the end of chromosomes. In other words, you age faster when you eat too much added sugar. Next, too much added sugar can also negatively impact your energy levels by causing a blood sugar and insulin spike, followed by that crash, which we saw here. And such blood sugar swings, along with the associated neurotransmitter dysregulation and inflammation, can not only affect our energy levels, but also our mental health, including a much higher probability of developing conditions such as depression. Any and all of which can have far-reaching consequences because it can affect our sleep, our relationships, our work, our motivation to engage in positive, essential lifestyle behaviors, and so forth. And so, as you can see, consuming too much added sugar can affect every aspect of our physical and mental health and well-being. But in saying that, sugar is only bad if you eat too much of it and too much of the wrong kind, as most of us do. Okay, so now that you know why reducing your consumption of sugar is important, let's talk about some ways in which we can do so. But before we do, how much sugar should we be eating? Well, the American Heart Association suggests an added sugar limit of no more than 100 calories per day, which equates to about 6 teaspoons of sugar for most women, and no more than 150 calories per day, which equates to about 9 teaspoons of sugar for most men. However, this is a maximum amount, and so it is important to realize that the less added sugar you consume, the better it is for your health. And to put this into perspective, one regular can of cola contains 9 teaspoons or 140 calories from sugar. So how do we ensure that we don't consume too much added sugar and stay within these guidelines and limits? Well, I want to be absolutely clear here, and that is that you don't need to avoid sugar altogether. Okay, so fruits and vegetables and dairy foods, etc., all contain naturally occurring sugars and are also sources of fiber, vitamins, and minerals such as calcium. So don't stop consuming all of these kinds of products. You should, however, avoid over-consuming added sugars. And the most simple ways to reduce your sugar is to make some simple food swaps. in a way that will still enable you to enjoy your food, because that's what life's all about. So some of these include swapping sugary cereals for non-sugary alternatives, including things like Nutri-Grain. I've got Milo here, muesli and granola, for something like Wheat Bix or porridge, and then just top it with fresh fruits. Swapping refined white bread for sugar-free wholemeal or brown bread. Swapping fruit yogurt for natural yogurt. Instead of reaching for the flavored fruit yogurt that's high in sugar, just enjoy a natural tail yogurt flavored with your favorite fruit. It's one of my favorite things to have. It's great for your gut bacteria. Swapping store-bought muffins, cakes and biscuits, which I've got here, for naturally sweetened bliss balls or low sugar homemade alternatives. And there are some great recipes within the Holistic 360 library, so be sure to check those out. Swapping jam for things like peanut butter, nut butter. Lathering your toast with your favorite jam could have you consuming more sugar than you think. So by using nuts, we can seriously reduce that. Okay. If you need a salty snack, then try swapping salty crackers for things like popcorn. Many store-bought salty crackers have so much sugar in them. So, why not try making your own popcorn where you can control the amount of oil and the amount of salt and the amount of sugar that goes into it? Swapped canned baked beans for homemade baked beans. It may come as a surprise that canned baked beans, whilst they are full of fiber, can contain a large amount of sugar. So instead of reaching for the tin baked beans, try to make your own from scratch. We use these and we make our own. Swap all of the high sugar sauces and condiments that you're so used to using with alternatives, or even better, just make your own. We just use a can of, tomatoes and garlic and onion and put spices in it. It's delicious. This also includes your salad dressings, which are often terribly high in sugar and can be replaced with something such as, olive oil and vinegar. Swap canned fruit in syrup for canned fruit in its own natural juices, which is what we do. We also even make our own when we have excess in the garden. Okay, no sugar. Swap dry fruit for fresh fruit. Okay, dry fruit for fresh fruit. If you're alcoholic, if you're a chocoholic like me, then swap regular chocolate with, a higher percentage of cacao chocolate or organic unprocessed chocolate. Swap artificial lollies and sweets for nature's natural sweets, like a fresh, date, or a handful of berries, or even some nuts. Cut back on ice cream, but when you do have it, ensure to swap regular ice cream, which is high in added sugar, for real ice cream, or even better, make your own. A simple recipe I've got is just blending a frozen banana with some peanut butter. Delicious. Basically, swap all processed foods for whole foods wherever possible, and just stay away from anything which indicates that it's low fat or a diet food. Foods that have had fat removed from them are often higher in sugar to substitute for that, with some examples being, low-fat milk and your yogurts are often really high in sugar if they're low fat. You can also swap added sugar in recipes for alternatives such as cinnamon and nutmeg and vanilla extract and lemon. Just try to be creative and find, recipes both inside Holistic 360 and outside, just online. And you can eat an endless variety of amazing foods, even if you eliminate all of the sugars from your diet. So don't feel like you're missing out. Also, when it comes to fluids, swap all sugary sweetened drinks for water, okay? Water here. This includes first and foremost our soft drinks, which as we saw contain an enormous amount of sugar. Fruit juice can also contain the same amount of sugar as soft drinks, which a lot of people get surprised about. Things like cordial also add unnecessary amounts of sugar too. Also avoid sport drinks too, unless you're an athlete, as they can be high in sugar as well. Instead of all of these beverages, it should be swapped with just water or plain filtered water or soda water or mineral water, either on its own or flavored with fruit, herbs, and veggies. Think things like cucumber and lemons. That's what I love to put in my water. Watermelon, grapefruit, or mint. I put mint in it fresh from the garden. All of which enhance the flavor without adding sugar, and you even get a little nutritional lift from it too. Also swap coffee and tea with sugar for coffee and tea with no sugar. Sure, in the beginning it will be hard to get used to, but after about 6 weeks, your taste buds and your body will learn to enjoy it without the added sugar. And you'll probably even wonder, how you drank it with sugar. If you enjoy drinking fruit juice and health smoothies, then sure to swap to fruit-only smoothies to vegetable smoothies, by using at least 3 veggies for every 1 fruit that you blend. And finally, swap high sugar alcoholic drinks for low sugar alcoholic drinks. For example, you could swap 1 glass of vodka and cranberry, which has 7.5 teaspoons of sugar, for a glass of beer, which contains no sugar. I also just want to quickly address a question that I get asked often when coaching others, and that is if sugar substitutes are better for you. Because by offering the taste of sweetness without any calories, artificial sweeteners seem like they could be one answer to helping us to avoid the battle of the bulge, including the whole host of metabolic conditions that come along with it. For example, an average can of soft drink delivers about 150 calories, almost all of them from sugar. The same amount of diet soft drink delivers 0 calories. The choice seems like a no-brainer, right? The FDA has approved 5 artificial sweeteners: saccharin, acesulfamine, aspartame, neotamine, and sucrose. It has also approved 1 natural low-calorie sweetener called stevia. How the human body and brain respond to these sweeteners is actually very complex. And one concern is that people who use artificial sweeteners may replace the lost calories through other sources, possibly offsetting weight loss or health benefits associated with it in the first place. And this can happen because we like to fool ourselves by saying something like, you know what, I'm drinking a diet soft drink, so it's okay to have some cake. It's also possible that these products change the way that we taste food itself. Non-nutritive sweeteners are far more potent than table sugar and high fructose corn syrup. A minuscule amount produces a sweet taste comparable to that of sugar without the comparable calories. And overstimulation of sugar receptors from frequent use of these hyper-intense sweeteners, which are like 20,000 times the sweetness of sugar sometimes, may limit tolerance for more complex tastes. That means that people who routinely use artificial sweeteners may start to find less intensely sweet foods, such as fruits, less appealing, and unsweet foods, such as vegetables, downright unpalatable. In other words, artificial sweeteners can make you shun healthy, filling, and highly nutritious foods while consuming more artificially flavored foods with, less nutritional value. Artificial sweeteners may play another trick too. And I say that because research suggests that they may prevent us from associating sweetness with caloric intake. As a result, we may crave more sweets, tend to choose sweets over nutritious foods, and gain more weight. And this makes quitting artificial sweeteners hard to do. Then, of course, there is the question of safety as well. Unfortunately, safety studies done to seek FDA approval of all artificial sweeteners have only been done so with smaller amounts of added sugar than what most people are ingesting on a daily basis in real life. We really don't know what effect large amounts of these chemicals will have over many years to come. However, there is lots of research to suggest that products which contain artificial sweeteners, such as soft drinks, are associated with an almost 40% greater risk for metabolic syndrome, which is characterized by obesity, high blood pressure, abnormal cholesterol, and insulin resistance, all the things we spoke about before, and an almost 70% increased risk for type 2 diabetes. Wow. Now, aren't these diseases that artificial sweeteners may help prevent in the first place, or supposed to prevent? And so when you consider all of these points, I think that artificial sweeteners don't really have a place in our diet, and even more so than added sugar doesn't. Instead, we should all be looking to substitute both added sugar and artificial sweeteners for foods containing natural occurring sugars, which are found in foods that are in their natural whole form, such as a banana or an apple or whatever else. Foods which are nutrient dense, high in fiber, and low in glycemic load usually. If you, after hearing this, you would still like to try an alternative sweetener, then ensure that you use a natural as opposed to an artificial sweetener instead, such as stevia and also monk fruit extract. So this also begs the question, are low or sugar-free diets okay? I say that because sugar detox or quit sugar diets may completely restrict all sugar or just added sugars from your diet. And this can result in short-term weight loss, but may not be suitable over the long term. I say that because a zero sugar diet would involve cutting out all fruit and vegetables, milk and grains and legumes because of their natural sugar content. And this puts a person at risk of developing serious nutritional deficiencies, as it's nearly impossible to get all of the nutrients and fiber without taking supplements. Healthy carbohydrates are also needed for the beneficial gut bacteria and to keep your digestive tract healthy. And so not only is a zero sugar diet unhealthy, it's also not sustainable either. However, restricting added sugars is sensible since these are common in energy-dense, nutrition-poor, discretionary foods and drinks. So feel free to cut out as many added sugars and processed foods as you can. In fact, the more you cut out, the healthier you will be. In saying this, however, there are some people who do have a problem digesting sugars, which is different from food allergies. Whether they experience symptoms may depend on how much of the food is consumed. Examples of sugar intolerances include things like lactose intolerance, where a person has a temporary or permanent problem digesting lactose, a sugar found in dairy products. FODMAPs intolerance, which stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, mono-saccharides, and polyols, where foods containing various sugars or alcohols, including fructose and mannitol, cause digestive symptoms such as bloating, fluctuates, diarrhea, or constipation. So if consuming certain foods or sugars causes you to have digestive symptoms, then always see your doctor or a dietitian. An accredited practicing dietitian can really help you with further nutritional advice and a personalized eating plan that considers your own individual medical circumstances. So on average, how many teaspoons of added sugar do you consume each day? Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to learn more about the other essential attributes of staying in your best shape. And until next time, watch what you chew, do what you need to do, and always live true.